Let me continue because I'm going to be reading this. Oh my Jesus. I'm going to be reading this book. All right, guys. Come on in, everybody. Good night, everyone. Good night, everybody. We are here tonight. You all know the drill. Yep. We are here tonight. We're not going to talk tonight. Tomorrow night, we will talk. But tonight, I'm going to be reading. Now, for those of you who are just coming, I want to say welcome to you. Thank you so much for stopping by. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. My day has just ended, and now it is time for me to come live. I wish I could have come earlier, but I have other obligations that I must fulfill. And so I wasn't able to come earlier. But I am here. I am here, and I'm here with you all, for you all, and for us. So here I go, guys. Tonight we are going to be reading. But you know something, guys? It look like that's the only time I don't fall asleep on the live is when I'm reading. Last night was terrible, yard foods. Yard foods and AG. Yeah, last night was something, wasn't it? I fell asleep on the live. Can y'all believe that? Oh my God. But y'all know I've been exhausted because, you know, going all the way out there in Vegas and coming back and the time difference. And then I didn't get any break because I was up all day. I was up all day last Tuesday, flew out Wednesday, so I was practically up all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, back to work Monday, back to work Tuesday. You have to understand when I when I fell out last night. Oh boy, yeah, that's what was gonna happen last night, right, Angie? Angie, what's up? Angie's cooking on spree is in the place. Angie, how you doing, my love? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yard Foods and AG roll up in the place morning. All right. And today we are going to continue the reading of Taken at the Flood by Agatha Christie. Now, this is a great book, guys. I read the book already, and sometimes you read a book one time and you don't, maybe because I read it all by myself, I didn't get it all just because I love reading, I just read it. But now that I'm reading it for us, with us, to us, it has taken on a new meaning. You're here early-ish. You're early, man. You're very early. You're very, very early, sis. And I appreciate you stopping by. So tonight we are going to be continuing with the reading of the book. For those of you who are just coming and you all do not know what this novel is about, I am going to tell you. So this novel is of a young woman. Some of the characters in the novel is the young woman, Rosalind, who was married to a very, very rich older man by the name of Gordon Cloud. And he died 2 weeks later. So she inherited all of his riches. Now there is a problem with her inheriting all of his riches because in his will, he had stipulated that if he should die, his family members, meaning his brothers, his sisters, their wives, all his family members that depended on him, would be taken care of for the rest of their lives, providing that he died while he was still unmarried. But in the event that he got married, everything he had would go to his wife. And because he wasn't married, his family members were very happy that they got a stipend every month. Every time they got into financial troubles, they could always call up good old Uncle Gordon Cloud and he would take them out of their financial mess. Now that he was married, everything was going to change, but things changed so quickly, they didn't have time to prepare for it because he died 2 weeks after getting married, so he wasn't able to change his will. So the first will stands that says his new wife will be the beneficiary of all of his riches. And that is not sitting well with his family. You know how family always fight over dead left. So this is what is going on. She has a brother, however, David, who is by her side the whole time, and David is trying to ensure that his sister is not taken advantage of by these people, because she has a very kind heart, and if they come to her for money, she will give it to them and stuff like that. But David is very strong-willed, and he doesn't crumble that easily, and so he is trying to protect his sister from the Cloud family with their Abashak behavior, wanting to come borrow money from her over and over until they're gonna swindle her down to nothing. So her brother David is sticking up for her. But tables have turned in the story, because there was a man who goes by the name of Enoch Harden, who showed up at one of the little villas there, and he has a plot working out where he he has asked to speak with David and Rosalind. Well, David took the mantle to speak with him rather than Rosalind, and because Rosalind was married prior to being married to Gordon, she was married to another man called Robert Underhay. He died in South Africa. Now, Enoch Arden has come up with some kind of a story to say that Robert Underhay is dead. So if Robert Underhay is not dead, that would mean that Rosalind's wedding to Gordon Cloud would be invalid, and thereby meaning she is not entitled to the inheritance from Gordon Cloud's death. And so David went to see Arden. I know Arden is DEAD. Andrea, you didn't listen to the story yesterday. Arden is DEAD with his head bashed in and all of that. So the police are investigating. They found a lipstick at the crime scene. They found an expensive lighter that has DH on it. Now remember, David's name is David Hunter. So the police are trying to determine who was there and who may have been the murderer. Now remember, Rowley went over there as well. So Rowley went over there. The housekeeper was there. David was there. And there is the lipstick. Who does the lipstick belong to? Nobody knows. But the police are on it. They have spoken to Rowley, they have spoken to David, and they are taking everybody's statements. And I'm sure the detectives are going to put all these statements together and see who was the last person to see Enoch Arden alive. So now we are going to continue reading, because we want to find out who murdered Enoch Arden. Let us continue. Hercule Poirot carefully folded the last of the newspapers he had sent George out to purchase. The information they gave was somewhat meager. Medical evidence was given that the man's skull was fractured by a series of heavy blows. The inquest had been adjourned for a fortnight. Anybody who could give information about a man named Enoch Arden, believed to have lately arrived from Cape Town, was asked to communicate with the chief constable of Oxfordshire. Poirot laid the papers in a neat pile and gave himself up to meditation. He was interested. He might, perhaps, have passed the first small paragraph by without interest if it had not been for the recent visit of Mistress Lionel Cloud. But that visit had recalled to him very clearly the incidents of that day at the club during that air raid. He remembered very distinctly Major Porter's voice saying, "Maybe a Mr. Enoch Arden will turn up somewhere 1,000 miles away and start life anew." He wanted now, rather badly, to know more about this man called Enoch Arden, who had died by violence at Wormsley Vale. He remembered that he was slightly acquainted with Superintendent Spence of the Oakshire Police Department, and he also remembered that young Mellon lived not very far from Wormsley Heath, and that young Mellon knew Jeremy Cloud. It was while he was meditating a telephone call. It was while he was meditating a telephone call to young Mellon that George came in and announced that a new Mr. Rowley Cloud would like to see him. It's my lipstick. It's my lipstick because you know I don't leave my red lipstick. I bet it is. I bet it is. Yeah, so what are you doing, sugar, sugar? And my darling plumber is here. Plumber, how are you doing, my love? Good to see you. Welcome, guys. Welcome. I'm curious, just as you all are, to find out about who murdered Enoch Arden in this book. Let's continue. He remembered that he was slightly acquainted with Superintendent Spence of the Oakshire Police Department, and he also remembered that young Mellon lived not very far from Wormsley Heath, and that young Mellon knew Jeremy Cloud. Oh, you're 1,000. Yes! Wonderful. Congrats, my love. Congrats. Congrats. It was while he was meditating a telephone call to young Mellon that George came in and announced that a Mr. Rowley Cloud would like to see him. Aha, said Hercule Periot with satisfaction. Show him in. A good looking, worried young man was shown in and seemed rather at a loss how to begin. Well, Mr. Cloud, said Periot helpfully, and what can I do for you? Rowley Cloud was eyeing Periot rather doubtfully. The flamboyant mustaches, the sartorial elegance, the white spats, and the pointed patent leather shoes all filled this insular young man with distinct misgivings. Periot realized this perfectly well and was somewhat amused. Rowley Cloud began rather heavily. I'm afraid I'll have to explain who I am and all that I'm about. You won't know my name. Periot interrupted him. But yes, I know your name perfectly. Your aunt, you see, came to see me last week. My aunt? Rowley's jaw dropped. He stared at Periot with the utmost astonishment. This so clearly was news to him that Periot put aside his first surmise, which was that the two visits were connected. For a moment, it seemed to him a remarkable coincidence that two members of the Cloud family would choose to consult him within such a short period of time. But a second later, he realized that there was no coincidence, merely a natural sequence proceeding from one initial cause. Jojo, you just come out of the bush. Joe, what's up? Now somebody ain't in the bush. Somebody on mommy duties this week. I am on mommy duties this week. So no somebody on mommy duties. And me youngin need me attention. Yeah, she gets it all. All of it. All of it. Yeah. So me do everything already. I don't know some me no normally cook, but me cook because me youngin need food. So I cooked and did all the other things. And now here I am, ready for y'all. Alberto, ¿cómo está mi amor? Who you talk to, Plumber? What's up, Masha? I mean, Jeff. What? Jappy is in the house. Boy, boy, boy. Our dear loving Jappy is here, guys. Say hi to Jappy now. Team there, and the plumber there, and Albert. All right, let us continue. Let us continue reading. Aloud he said, I assume that Mrs. Lionel Cloud is your aunt. If anything, Rowley looked rather more astonished than before. He said with the utmost incredulity, Aunt Katy? Surely don't you mean Mrs. Jeremy Cloud? Perriot shook his head. But what on earth could Aunt Katy Harriet murmured discreetly. She was directed to me, I understand, by spirit guidance. Oh Lord, there goes Katie again with that spirit, talking about spirit guide. The only spirit guiding her is the devil, guiding her to go beg and borrow. She soon guided her to go steal. Oh Lord, said Rowley. He looked relieved and amused. He said, as though reassuring Period, she's quite harmless, you know. I wonder, said Period. What do you mean? Is anybody ever quite harmless? Rowley stared. Period sighed. You have come to me to ask me something, haven't you? Yes, he prompted gently. The worried look came back on Rowley's face. It's rather a long story, I'm afraid. Perriot was afraid of it too. He had a very shrewd idea that Rowley Cloud was not the sort of person to come to the point quickly. He leaned back and half closed his eyes as Rowley began. My uncle, you see, was Gordon Cloud. I know all about Gordon Cloud, said Perriot helpfully. Good, then I need not explain. He married a few weeks before his death, a young widow called Underhay. Since his death, she has been living at Wormsley Vale, she and a brother of hers. We all understand that her first husband had died of fever in Africa, but now it seems as though that might not be true. Aha! Perriot sat up. And what has led you to that surmise? Rowley described the advent of Mr. Enoch Arden in Wormsley Vale. Perhaps you have seen in the papers. Yes, I have seen. Perriot was again helpful. Rowley went on. He described his first impression of the man Arden, his visit to the stag, the letter he had received from Beatrice Lippincott, and finally the conversation that Beatrice had overheard. Of course, Rowley said, one can't be sure just what she did here. She may have exaggerated it all a bit, or even got it wrong. Has she told her story to the police? Rowley nodded. I told her she had better done so. I don't quite see, pardon me, why you came to see me, Mr. Cloud. Do you want me to investigate this murder? For it is a murder, I assume. Lord, no, said Rowley. I don't want anything of that kind. That's a policeman's job. He was bumped off all right. No, no. What I'm after is this. I want you to find out who the fellow was. Perriot's eyes narrowed. Who do you think he was, Mr. Cloud? Well, I mean, Enoch Arden isn't a name. Dash it all, it's a quotation. Tennyson. I went and mugged it up. Fellow who comes back and finds out his wife has married another fellow. So you think, said Perriot quietly, that Enoch Arden was really Robert Underhay himself? Rowley said slowly, well, he might have been. I mean, about the right age and appearance and all that. Of course, I've gone over it all with Beatrice again and again. She can't naturally remember exactly what they both said. Mm. Sister Winsome, what's up? How are you doing? Jamaica Farmers Hut. Bless up yourself, my brother. Good to see you. The chap said Robert Underhay had come down in the world and was in bad health and needed money. Well, he might have been talking about himself, mightn't he? He seems to have said something about it. Wouldn't suit David Hunter's book if Underhay turned up in Wormsley Vale, sounding a bit as though he was there under an assumed name. What evidence of identification was there at the inquest? Rowley shook his head. Nothing definite. Only the stag people saying he was the man who had come there and registered as Enoch Arden. What about his papers? He hadn't any. What? Perriott sat up in surprise. No papers of any kind? Nothing at all. Some spare cocks and a shirt and a toothbrush, etc. But no papers. No passport? No letters? Not even a ration card? Nothing at all. I tell you, nothing. Now that, said Perriott, is very interesting. Yes, very interesting. Rowley went on. David Hunter, that's Rosalind Cloud's brother, had called to see him the evening after he arrived. His story to the police is that he had had a letter from the chap saying he had been a friend of Robert Underhay's and was down and out. At his sister's request, he went to the stag and saw the fellow and gave him a fiver. That's his story, and you bet he means to stick to it. Of course, the police are keeping dark about what Beatrice heard. David Hunter says he had no previous acquaintances with the man. That's what he says. Anyway, I gather Hunter never met Underhay. And what about Rosalind Cloud? The police asked her to look at the body in case she knew the man. She told them that he was a complete stranger to her. Eh bien, said Perriott. Then that answers your question. Does it? Said Rowley bluntly. I think not. If the dead man is Underhay, then Rosalind was never my uncle's wife, and she's not entitled to a penny of his money. Do you think she would recognize him under those circumstances? You don't trust her? I don't trust either of them. Surely there are plenty of people who could say for certain that the dead man is or is not Underhay. It doesn't seem to be so easy. That's what I want you to do. Find someone who knows Underhay. Apparently, he has no living relatives in this country, and he was always an unsociable loner most he was an unsociable loner most of his life. I suppose there must be old servants, friends, someone. But the war's broken up everything and shifted people around. I wouldn't know how to begin to tackle the job. Anyway, I haven't the time. I'm a farmer and I'm short-handed. Why me? Said Hercules Perriott. Rowley looked embarrassed. A faint twinkle came into Perriott's eyes. Spirit guidance? He murmured. Good Lord, no, said Rowley, horrified. A matter of fact, he hesitated. I heard a fellow I know talk about you. Said you were a wizard at those sort of things. I don't know about your fees. Expensive, I expect. We'd rather a stone-faced lot, but I dare say we could cough it up amongst the lot of us. That is, if you'll take it on. Hercule Perriot said slowly, Yes, I think perhaps I can help you. Whenever hear all people be poor, ball and say them don't have no money, but tell them go a man. Mighty God of Jesus. Tell them go a man. Them not have money to feed their children, they not have money to pay them, they not have money to do nothing. But then find money for go a man. His memory, a very precise and definite memory, went back. The club bore, the rustling newspapers, the monotonous voice, the name. He had heard the name. It would come back to him presently. If not, he could always ask Mellon. No, he had got it. Porter, Major Porter. Hercule Perriott rose to his feet. Will you come back here this afternoon, Mr. Cloud? Well, I don't know. Yes, I suppose I could. But surely you can't do anything in that short time, can you? He looked he looked at Perriot with awe and incredulity. Perriot would have been less than human if he could have resisted the temptation to show off. With memories of a brilliant predecessor in his mind, he said solemnly, I have my methods, Mr. Cloud. It was clearly the right thing to say. Rowley's expression became respectful in the extreme. Yes, of course. Really, I don't know how you people do these things. Harriet did not enlighten him. When Rowley had gone, he sat down and wrote a short note. Giving it to George, he instructed him to take it to the Coronation Club and wait for an answer. The answer was highly satisfactory. Major Porter presented his compliments to M. Hercule Periot and would be happy to see him and his friend at 79 Edgway Street, Camden Hill, that afternoon at 5 o'clock. At 4:30, Rowley Cloud reappeared. Any luck, Mr. Periot? But yes, Mr. Periot, we go now to see an old friend of Captain Robert Underhays. What? Rowley's mouth fell open. He stared at Periot with the amazement a small boy shows when a conjurer produces rabbits out of a hat. But it's incredible. I don't understand how you can do these things. Why? It's only a few hours. Periot waved a deprecated hand and tried to look modest. He had no intentions of revealing the simplicity with which his conjuring tricks had been done. His vanity was pleased to impress this simple Rowley. OMG. The two men went out together, and hailing a taxi, they drove to Camden Hill. Major Porter had the first floor of a small shabby house. They were admitted by a cheerful, blousy looking woman who took them up. It was a square room with bookshelves round about it and some rather bad sporting prints. There were two rugs on the floor, good rugs with lovely dim color, but very worn. Harriet noticed that the center of the floor was covered with a new heavy varnish, whereas the varnish round the edge was old and rubbed. He realized then that there had been other better rugs until recently, rugs that were worth good money in those days. He looked up at the man standing erect by the fireplace in his well cut, shabby suit. Periot guessed that for Major Porter, retired army officer, life was lived very near the bone. Taxation and the increased cost of living struck hardest at the old war horses. Some things, he guessed, Major Porter would cling to until the end. His club subscription, for instance. Major Porter was speaking jerkily. Afraid I don't remember meeting you, Mr. Periot. At the club, you say? Couple of years ago, maybe? Know your name, of course. Well, this, said Periot, is Mr. Rowley Cloud. Major Periot jerked his head in honor of the introduction. Howdy do, he said. Afraid I ask you to, afraid I ask you to have a glass of cherry? Matter of fact, my wine merchant has lost his stock in the Blitz. Got some gin? Filthy stuff, I always think. Or what about some beer? They accepted beer. Arlies, what's up? They accepted beer. Major Porter produced a cigarette. Smoke? Periot accepted a cigarette. The Major struck a match and lit Periot's cigarette. You don't know, said Major to Rowley. Mind if I light my pipe? He did so with a good deal of sucking and blowing. Now then, he said, when all these preliminaries had been accomplished, what's all this about? He looked from one to the other of them. Periot said, You may have read in the paper of the death of a man at Wormsleyvale, haven't you? Porter shook his head. May have, but I don't think so. His name was Arden. Enoch Arden? Porter still shook his head. He was found at the Stag Inn with the back of his head smashed in. Porter frowned. Let me see. Yes, did see something about that, I believe, some days ago. Well, yes, I have here a photograph. It is a press photograph and not very clear, I'm afraid. What we should like to know, Mr. Porter, is whether you have ever seen this man before. He handed over the best production of the dead man's face he had been able to find. Major Porter took it and frowned at it. Wait a second. The major took out his spectacles, adjusted them on his nose, and studied the photograph more closely. Then he gave a sudden start. God bless my soul, he said. Well, I'd be damned. You know the man, Major? Of course I know him. It's Underhay, Robert Underhay. You are sure of that? There was triumph in Rowley's voice. Of course I'm sure. Robert Underhay. I'd swear to it anywhere. Oh my God. OMG. Y'all believe that? We know it's not Robert Underhay. It is not. But this is what they have cooked up to say that the man is Robert Underhay because they do not want Rosalind to have the money. They want to come up with the argument to say that Rosalind's marriage to Gordon Cloud was bigamy, so that marriage is invalid because her first husband, Robert Underhay, was still alive. You see how people wicked? You see this plot falling into place? Let us continue. Because remember, Periot had sent the letter before. Before Periot came with Rowley, he had sent the letter, he had sent that letter on to this Porter guy. So Porter and Periot are in on this trick to trick Rowley into believing that this dead man was really Underhay. And remember, it was the same thing that Rowley's Aunt Katie had come to see Periot about. Oh my God. Let us move on right along. Let us move on. The telephone rang and Lynn went to answer it. Rowley's voice spoke. Lynn? Rowley? Her voice sounded depressed. He said, What are you up to? I never see you these days. Oh, well, it's all chores. Running around with a basket, waiting for fish and keying up for a bit of quite disgusting cake, all that sort of thing. Home life. I want to see you. I've got something to tell you. What sort of thing? He gave a chuckle. Good news. Meet me by Roland Corpse. We are plowing up there. Ha ha. Good news? Lynn put the receiver down. What to Rowley Cloud would be good news? Finance? Had he told that young bull at a better place? Had he sold that young bull at a better price than he had hoped to get? No, she thought, it must be more than that. As she walked up the field to Roland Copse, Rowley left the tractor and came to meet her. Hello, Lynn. Why, Rowley, you look you look a little different somehow. He laughed. I should think I do. Our luck's turned, Lynn. What do you mean? Do you remember old Jeremy mentioning a chap named Hercules Periot? Hercules Periot, Lynn frowned. Yes, I do remember something of the sort. Quite a long time ago, when the war was on, they were in that mausoleum of a club of his, and there was an air raid. Well, Lynn demanded impatiently. Fellow has the wrong clothes and all that. French chap or Belgian. Queer fellow, but he's the goods, all right. Lynn knit her brows. What's he, a detective? That's right. Well, this fellow who was down at the stag, I didn't tell you, but an idea was getting around that he might just possibly be Rosalind Cloud's first husband. Lynn laughed. Simply because he called himself Enoch Arden? What an absurd idea! Not so absurd, my girl. Old Spence got Rosalind down to have a look at him, and she swore quite firmly that he wasn't her husband. So that finished it? It might have, said Rowley. But for me? For you? What did you do? I went to this fellow called Hercule Perriot. I told him we wanted another opinion. Could he rustle up someone who had actually known Robert Underhay? My word! But he's absolutely wizard, that chap. Just like rabbits out of a hat, he produced a fellow who was Underhay's best friend in a few hours. Old boy called Porter. Rowley stopped. Then he chuckled again with that note of excitement that had surprised and startled Lynn. Now keep this under your hat, Lynn. The super swore me to secrecy, but I'd like you to know. The dead man is Robert Underhay. What? Lynn took a step back. She stared at Rowley blankly. Robert Underhay himself? Porter hadn't the least doubt. So you see, Lynn, Rowley's voice was more exciting. We have won. After all, we have won. We have beaten them damn crooks. What damn crooks are you talking about? Hunter, David Hunter and his sister Rosalind. They are licked out of it. Rosalind doesn't get Gordon Cloud's money. We get it. It's ours. Gordon's will that he made before he married Rosalind, that is good, and that divides it amongst us. I get a fourth share. See? If her first husband was alive when she married Gordon, she was never married to Gordon after all. Are you are you sure of what you are saying? He stared at her. For the first time, he looked faintly puzzled. Of course, I'm sure. It's elementary. Everything's all right now. It's the same as Gordon meant it to be. Everything's the same as if that precious pair had never butted in. Everything's the same. But you couldn't, Lynn thought, wash out like that something that had happened. You couldn't pretend that it had never been. She said this slowly. What will they do? Hey! She saw that until that moment. Rowley had hardly considered that question. I don't know. Go back where the hell they came from, I suppose. I think, she could see him slowly following it out. Desiree, what's up? How are you doing? Yes, I think we ought to do something for her. I mean, she married Gordon in all good faith. I gather she really believed her first husband was dead. It's not her fault. Yes, we must do something about her. Give her a decent allowance. Make it up between us all. You like her, don't you? Lynn said. Well, yes, he considered. I do in a way. She's a nice kid. She knows a cow when she sees it. I don't, said Lynn. Oh, you will learn, said Rowley kindly. And what about David? Asked Lynn. Rowley scowled. Rowley scolded. To hell with David. It was never his money anyway. He just came along and sponged on his sister. No, Rowley, it wasn't like that. It wasn't. He's not a sponger. He's an adventurer, perhaps, and a ruddy murderer, she said breathlessly. What do you mean? Well, who do you think killed Underhay? She cried. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Of course he killed Underhay. Who else could have done it? He was down there all day. Came down by the came down by the 5:30. Came down by the 5:30. Came down by the 5:30. I was meeting some stuff at the station and caught sight of him in the distance. He went back to London that evening after having killed Underhay, said Rowley triumphantly. You ought not to say things like that, Rowley. What time was Underhay killed? Well, I don't know exactly. Rowley slowed up, considered. Don't you suppose we shall know We shall know until the inquest tomorrow, sometime between 9 and 10, I imagine. David caught the 9:20 train back to London. Look here, Lynn. How do you know? I met him. He was running for it. How do you know he never caught it? Because he telephoned me from London later. Rowley scowled angrily. What the hell should he telephoning you? Should he be telephoning you for? Look here, Lynn. I'm damned if I. Oh, what does it mean, Rowley? Anyway, it shows he caught that train. Plenty of time to have killed Underhay and then run for the train. Not if he was killed after 9 o'clock. Well, he may have been killed just before 9, but his voice was a little doubtful. Lynn half closed her eyes. Was that the truth of it? When, breathless, swearing, David had emerged from the corpse, had it been a murderer fresh? Oh, had it been a murderer fresh from his crime who had taken her in his arms? She remembered his curious excitement, the recklessness of his mood. Was that the way that murder would affect him? It might. She had to admit it. Were David and murder so far removed from each other? Would he kill a man who had never done him any harm? A ghost from the past? A man whose only crime was to stand between Rosalind and a big inheritance? Between David and the enjoyment of Rosalind's money? She murmured, why should he kill Underhay? My God, Lynn, can you ask? I just told you, Underhay's being alive means that we get Gordon's money. Anyway, Underhay was blackmailing him. Aha, that fell more into the pattern. David might kill a blackmailer. In fact, wasn't it just the way he would deal with a blackmailer? Yes, it all fell into pattern. David's haste, his excitement, his fierce, almost angry love making. And later, his renouncement of her. I'd better clear out. Yes, it fitted. From a long way away, she heard Rowley's voice asking, what's the matter, Lynn? Are you feeling all right? Yes, of course. Well, for heaven's sake, don't look so glum. He turned, looked down the hillside to Long Willers. Thank goodness we can have the place smartened up a bit now. Get some labor saving gadgets put in. Make it right for you. I don't want you to pig it, Lynn. That was to be her home, that house, her home with Rowley. And one morning at 8 o'clock, David would swing by the neck till he was dead. Oh, that's what it was. Oh yeah. I realized after I read it, but I didn't want to go back. I realized after I'd read it, but I didn't want to go back and read it over. OMG. Now you see what is going on there? Nobody knows exactly who killed Underhay. And look at them speculating. And look at Rowley already making plans for the money. You all see how that? Rowley already making big plans for the money. Already come to a conclusion about the money, and the money ain't even his. Let us continue. Let us continue. Sister Desiree, what's up? How are you doing, my love? Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Let us continue. You know, when we start reading books like this and then get excited, I don't want to put them down. And this book, we are on page 145, and this book has like 245 pages. And we are at 145. We have 100 pages to go. We're not going to finish it. We're not going to finish it tonight. We're just going to read for a little bit. With a pale, determined face and watchful eyes, David had his hands on Rosalind's shoulders. It will be all right. I'm telling you, it will be all right. But you must keep your head and do exactly as I tell you. And if they take you away, you said that? You said what? You did say that they might take you away. It's a possibility, yes, but it won't be for long, not if you keep your head. I'll do what you tell me, David. There's a good girl. All you have to do, Rosalind, is to stick to your story. Hold to it that the dead man is not your husband, Robert Underhay. They'll trap me into saying things I don't mean. No, they won't. It's all right, I tell you. No, it's wrong. It's been wrong all along, taking money that doesn't belong to us. I lie awake night after night thinking of it, David, taking what doesn't belong to us. God is punishing us for our wickedness. Oh, oh, isn't that interesting? I'll tell you this story has so many twists and turns. Isn't that interesting? So, oh, so did David and Rosalind pretend that Underhay was dead and then have Rosalind marry Gordon Cloud? Now she's pretending she don't know the man that is in the parlor in the at the parlor. She pretending she don't know the man. Oh my gosh. Listen, he will not put his crumpled little fingers on that money. Lord Jesus, the, the story is so captivating. I don't even know who is going to get the money or what. But that man is indeed Robert Underhay. So you see what it is. David and Rosalind are spinning their own tales, and so too are the clouds. So everybody's spinning tales. Lord of mercy. He looked at her, frowning. She was cracking. Yes, definitely she was cracking. There had always been that religious streak. Her conscience had never been quite stilled. Now, unless he was extremely lucky, she'd break down completely. Well, there was only one thing to be done. Listen, Rosalind, do you want me to be hanged? Her eyes widened in horror. Oh, David, you wouldn't. They couldn't. There's only one person who can hang me. That's you. If you once admit by look or sign or word that the dead man might be Underhay, you put the rope around my neck. Do you understand that? Oh my God. Yes, that had got home. She gazed at him with wide, horrified eyes. I'm so stupid, David. No, you are not. In any case, you haven't got to be clever. You'll have to swear solemnly that the dead man is not your husband. Can you do that? She nodded. Look stupid if you like. Look as if you don't understand quite what they're asking you. That will do no harm, but stand firm on the points I've gone over with you. Cathorn will look after you. He's a very able criminal lawyer. That's why I've got him. He'll be at the inquest and he'll protect you from any heckling. But even to him, stick to your story. For God's sake, don't try to be clever or think you can help me by some line of your own. Hey, I'll do it, David. I'll do exactly what you tell me. Good girl. When it's all over, we'll go away to the south of France, to America, somewhere, anywhere. In the meantime, take care of your health. Don't lie awake at night fretting and working yourself up. Take those sleeping things Dr. Cloud prescribed for you, bromide or something. Take one every night. Cheer up. And remember, there's a good time coming. Now he looked at his watch. It's time to go to the inquest. It's called for 11. He looked round the long, beautiful drawing room. Beauty, comfort, wealth. He had enjoyed it all. A fine house, Furrobank, Perhaps this was goodbye. He had got himself into a jam, that was for certain, but even now he didn't regret. And for the future, well, he'll go on taking chances, and we must take the current where it serves or lose our ventures. He looked at Rosalind. She was watching him with large, appealing eyes, and intuitively he knew what she wanted. I didn't kill him, Rosalind, he said gently. I swear it to you by every saint in your calendar. Aye, mighty God, the book have more twist and turn than Fern Gully. You know what, I let me turn on the fan, cause me kinda get at the story here kinda getting me heated. Kind of getting me heated. All right, now here I am. Let us continue reading. This story is just too interesting for me to just leave it alone. Let us continue. The inquest was held in the Corn Market. The coroner, Mr. Pebmarsh, was a small, fussy man with glasses and a considerable sense of his own importance. Beside him sat the large bulk of Superintendent Spence. In an unobtrusive seat was a small, foreign-looking man with a large black moustache. The Cloud family, the Jeremy Clouds, the Lionel Clouds, Rowley Cloud, Mrs. Marchmont and Lynn, they were all there. Major Porter sat by himself, fidgeting, and ill at ease. David and Rosalind arrived last. They sat by themselves. The coroner cleared his throat and, glancing round the jury of 9 local worthies, started his proceedings. Constable Peacock, Sergeant Vane, Dr. Lionel Cloud. You were you were attending a patient professionally at the Stag when Gladys Aitken came to you. What did she say? She informed me that the occupant of number 5 was lying on the floor dead. In consequence, you went up to number 5? I did. Will you describe what you found there? Dr. Cloud described body of a man, face downwards, head injuries, back of the skull, fire tongs. You were of opinion that the injuries were inflicted with the tongs in question? Some of them unquestionably were, and that several blows had been struck? Yes, I did not make a detailed examination as I considered that the police should be called before the body was touched or its position altered. Very proper. The man was dead, wasn't he? Yes, he had been dead for some hours. How long, in your opinion, had he been dead? I should I should hesitate to be very definite about that. At least 11 hours, quite possibly 13 or 14. Let us say between 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. the preceding evening. Thank you, Dr. Cloud. Then came the police sergeant, giving a full and technical description of the wounds. There was an abrasion and swelling on the lower jaw, and 5 or 6 blows had been struck on the base of the skull, some of which had been delivered after death. It was an assault of great savagery. Exactly. Oh my God. Would great strength have been needed to inflict those blows? No, no, not exactly strength. The tongues, grasped by the pincher's end, could be easily swung without much exertion. The heavy steel ball, which forms, which forms the head of the tongues, makes them a formidable weapon. Quite a delicate person could have inflicted the injuries if, that is to say, they were struck in a frenzy of excitement. Thank you, doctor. Details as to the condition of the body followed. Well nourished, healthy, age about 45, no signs of illness or disease, heart, lungs, etc. All good. Beatrice Lippincott gave evidence of the arrival of deceased. He had registered as Enoch Arden from Cape Town. Did deceased produce a ration book? No, sir. Did you ask him for one? Not at first. I did not know how long he was staying. But you did eventually ask him? Yes, sir. He arrived on Friday, and on Saturday I said if he was staying more than 5 days, would he please let me have his ration book? What did he say to that? He said he would give it to me, but he did not actually do so. No, he did not say that he had lost it or had not he did not say that he had lost it or had not got one. Oh no, he just said, I'll look it out and bring it along. Miss Lippincott, did you, on the night of Saturday, overhear a certain conversation? With a good deal of elaborate explanation as to the necessity she was under of visiting number 4, Beatrice Lippincott told her tale. The coroner guided her astutely. Thank you. Did you mention this conversation you had overheard to anybody? Yes, I told Mr. Rowley Cloud. Why did you tell Mr. Cloud? I thought he ought to know, Beatrice flushed. A tall, thin man, Mr. Gaythorne, rose and asked permission to put a question. In the course of the conversation between the deceased and Mr. David Hunter, did the deceased at any time mention definitely that he himself was Robert Underhay? No, no, he didn't. In fact, he spoke of Robert Underhay as though Robert Underhay was quite another person. Yes, he did. Thank you, Mr. Coroner. That was all I wanted to get clear. Beatrice Lippincott stood down and Rowley Cloud was called. He confirmed that Beatrice had repeated the story to him and then gave his account of his interview with the deceased. His last words to you were, I don't think you'll prove that without any cooperation. That being the fact that Robert Underhay was still alive. That's what he said, yes. And he laughed. He laughed? Did he? What did you take those words to mean? Well, I just thought he was trying to get me to make him an offer. But afterwards, I got to thinking. Yes, Mr. Cloud, but what you thought afterwards is hardly relevant. Shall we put it that as a result of that interview, you set about trying to find some person who was acquainted with the late Robert Underhay, and that, with certain help, you were successful? Rowley nodded. That's right. That time. What time was it when you left the deceased? As nearly as I can tell, it was 5 minutes to 9. What made you fix on that time? As I went along the street, I heard the 9 o'clock news pips through the open window. Did the deceased mention at what time he was expecting his client? He said at any minute. He did not mention any name? No. David Hunter. There was just a faint soft buzz as the inhabitants of Wormsley Vale craned their necks to look at the tall, thin, bitter-looking young man who stood defiantly facing the coroner. The preliminaries went rapidly. The coroner continued. You went to see the deceased on Saturday morning or Saturday evening? On Saturday evening, he answered. I received a letter from him asking for assistance and stating he had known my sister's first husband in Africa. You have got that letter? No, I don't keep letters. You have heard the account given by Beatrice Lippincott of your conversation with the deceased. Is that a true account? Quite untrue. The deceased spoke of knowing my late brother-in-law, complained of his own bad luck, and of having come down in the world and begged for some financial assistance, which, as is usual, he was quite confident of being able to repay. Did he tell you that Robert Underhay was still alive? David smiled. Certainly not. He said, if Robert was still alive, I know he would help me. That is quite different from what Beatrice Lippincott told us, isn't it? Eavesdroppers, said David, usually hear only a portion of what goes on and frequently get the whole thing wrong owing to supplying the missing details from their own fertile imaginations. Beatrice flounced angrily and exclaimed, well, I never! The coroner said repressively, silence, please. Now, Mr. Hunter, did you visit the deceased again on the night of Tuesday? No, I did not. You have heard Mr. Rowley Cloud say that the deceased expected a visitor. He may have expected a visitor. If so, I was not that visitor. I'd given him a fiver before. I thought that was quite enough for him. There was no proof that he had ever known Robert Underhay. My sister, since she inherited a large income from her husband, has been the target of every begging letter writer and every sponger in the neighborhood. Quietly, he let his eyes pass over the assembly of the clouds. Mr. Hunter, will you tell us where you were on the evening of Tuesday? Find out, said David. Mr. Hunter, the coroner rapped the table. That is a most foolish and ill-advised thing to say. Why should I tell you where I was and what I was doing? Time enough for that when you accuse me of murdering the man. If you persist in that attitude, it may come to that sooner than you think. Do you recognize this, Mr. Hunter? Leaning forward, David took the gold cigarette lighter into his hand. His face was puzzled. Handing it back, he said slowly, yes, it's mine. When did you have it last? I missed it, he paused. Yes, Mr. Hunter? The coroner's voice was suave. Gathorne fidgeted, seemed about to speak, but David was too quick for him. I had it last Friday morning. I don't remember seeing it since. Mr. Gathorne rose. With your permission, Mr. Coroner, you visited the deceased on Saturday evening. Might you not have left the lighter there then? I might have, I suppose, David said slowly. I certainly don't remember seeing it after Friday. He added, where was it found? The coroner said, we shall go into that later. You can stand down now, Mr. Hunter. David moved slowly back to his seat. He bent his head and whispered to Rosalind Cloud, Major Porter. Hemming and hawing a little, Major Porter took the stand. He stood there, an erect, soldering figure, as though on parade. Only the way he moistened his lips showed the intense nervousness from which he was suffering. You are George Douglas Porter, late Major of the Royal African Rifles, aren't you? Yes. Now, well, did you know Robert Underhay? In a parade ground voice, Mr. Porter barked out places and dates. You have viewed the body of the deceased? Yes. Can you identify that body? Yes. It is the body of Robert Underhay. A buzz of excitement went around the courtroom. You state that positively and without the least doubt? I do. There is no possibility of you being mistaken? None at all. Thank you, Major Porter. Mrs. Gordon Cloud. Rosalind arose. She passed Major Porter. He looked at her with some curiosity. She did not even glance at him. Mrs. Cloud, you were taken by the police to see the body of the deceased? She shivered. Yes. You stated definitively that it was the body of a man completely unknown to you? Yes. In view of the statement just made by Major Porter, would you like to withdraw or amend your own statement? No. You still assert definitively that the body was not that of your husband, Robert Underhay? It was not my husband's body. It was a man I had never seen a day in my life. Come now, Mrs. Cloud. Major Porter has definitely recognized it as the body of his friend, Robert Underhay, Rosalind said expressionlessly. Major Porter is mistaken. You are not under oath in this court, Mrs. Cloud, but it is likely that you will be under oath in another court shortly. Are you prepared then to swear that the body is not that of your husband, Robert Underhay, but of an unknown stranger? I am prepared to swear that it is not the body of my husband, but of a man quite unknown to me. Her voice was clear and unfaltering. Her eyes met the coroner unshrinkingly. He murmured, "You can stand down now, ma'am." Then, removing his pince nez, he addressed the jury. They were there to discover how this man came to his death. As to that, there could be little question. There could be no idea of accident or suicide, nor could there be any suggestion of manslaughter. There remained only one verdict: willful murder. As to the identity of the dead man, there was not that was not clearly established. They had heard one witness, a man of upright character and probity, whose word could be relied upon, say that the body was that of a former friend of his, Robert Underhay. On the other hand, Robert Underhay's death from fever had been established in 1945, apparently to the satisfaction of the local authorities, and no questions had then been raised. In contradiction of Major Porter's statement, Robert Underhay's widow, now Mrs. Gordon Cloud, stated positively that the body was not that of her husband, Robert Underhay. There were diametrical opposite statements. Passing from the question of identity, they would have to decide if there was any evidence to show those hands had murdered the deceased. They might think that the evidence pointed to a certain person, but a good deal of evidence was needed before a case could be made out could be made out evidence of motive and opportunity. The person must have been seen by someone in the vicinity of the crime at the appropriate time. If there was not such evidence, the best verdict was that of willful murder without sufficient evidence to show by whose hand. Such a verdict would leave the police free to pursue the necessary inquiries. He then dismissed them to continue their verdict. They took three-quarters of an hour, then returned a verdict of willful murder against David Hunter. Ha ha ha! The jury came back with a verdict of willful murder against David Hunter. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. It is really an interesting book, Angie. I'm telling you, sis. It is really an interesting novel. Now, honestly, why I like read? Because when we read, I always find something interesting. Holy mackerels. All right, let us move on. I was afraid they'd do it, said the coroner apologetically. Local prejudice, feeling rather than logic. The coroner, the chief constable, Superintendent Spence, and Hercules Perriott were all in consultation together after the inquest. You did your best, said the chief constable. It's premature, to say the least of it, said Spence, frowning. And it hampers us. Do you know Mr. Hercule Perriott? He was instrumental in bringing Porter forward, the coroner said graciously. I have heard of you, M. Perriott, and Perriott made an unsuccessful attempt to look modest. M. Perriot's interested in the case, said Spence with a grin. Truly, that is so, said Perriott. I was in it, as you might say, before there was a case. And in answer to their interested glances, he told he told of the queer little scene in the club when he had first heard a mention of Robert Hayes under his name. That's an additional point in Robert That's an additional point in Porter's evidence when the case comes to trial, said the chief constable thoughtfully. Underhay Underhay actually planned a pretended death and spoke of using the name Enoch Arden. The chief constable murdered. Aha! But will that be admissible as evidence? Words spoken by a man who is now dead. It may not be admissible as evidence, said Perrier thoughtfully, but it raises a very interesting and suggestive line of thought. What we want, said Spence, is not suggestion, but a few concrete facts. Someone who actually saw David Hunter at the stag or near it on Saturday evening. It ought to be easy, said the chief constable, frowning. If it was abroad in my country, it would be easy enough, said Parriott. There would be a little cafe where someone takes the after evening coffee. But in provincial England, he threw up his hands. The superintendent nodded. Some of the folks are in the pubs and will stay in the pubs till closing time, and the rest of the population are inside their homes listening to the 9 o'clock news. If you ever go along the main street here between 8:30 and 10, it's completely deserted. Not a soul. He counted on that, suggested the chief constable. Maybe, said Spence. His expression was not a happy one. Presently the chief constable and the coroner departed. Spence and were left together. You do not like the case now, do you? Asked Perriott sympathetically. That young man worries me, says Spence. He is the kind that you never know where you are with him. When they are most innocent of a business, they act as though they were guilty. And when they are guilty, why, you'd take your oath they were angles of light. You think he's guilty? Asked Perriott. Don't you? Spence countered. Perriott spread out his hands. I should be interested, he said, just exactly how much you have against him. You don't mean legally, you mean in the way of probability? Perriott nodded. There's the lighter, said Spence. Where did you find it? Under the body. Fingerprints on it? None. Aha, said Perriott. Yes, said Spence. I don't like that too much myself. Then the dead man's watch had stopped at 9:10. That fits in with the medical evidence quite nicely, and with Rowley Cloud's evidence that Underhay was expecting his client at any minute. Presumably that client was almost due. Perriott nodded. Yes, it is all very neat. And the thing you can't get away from, to my mind, Mr. Perriott, is that he's the only person, he and his sister, that is to say, who had the ghost or shadow of a motive. Either David Hunter killed Underhay, or else Underhay was killed by some outsider who followed him here for some reason that we know nothing about and that seems wildly improbable. Oh, I agree. You see, there's no one in Wormsley Vale who could possibly have a motive, unless, by a coincidence, someone is living here other than the Hunters who had a connection with Underhay in the past. I never rule out coincidences, but there hasn't been a hint of suggestion of anything of the kind. The man was a stranger to everyone but that brother and sister. Harriot nodded. To the Cloud family, Robert Underhay would be the apple of their eye, to be kept alive by every means possible. Robert Underhay, alive and kicking, means the certainty of a large fortune divided amongst them. Again, mon ami, I agree with you enthusiastically. Robert Underhay, alive and kicking, is what the Cloud family needs. So back we come. Rosalind and David Hunter are the only two people who have a motive. Rosalind Cloud was in London, but David, we knew, was in Wormsley Vale that day. He arrived at farm. He arrived at 5:30 at Wormsley Heath Station. So now we have a motive, written very big, and the fact that at 5:30 and onward to some unspecified time, he was on the spot. Exactly. Now take Beatrice Lippincott's story. I believe that story. She overheard what she said she overheard, though she may have gingered it up a little bit, as in every human, only human, as you say. Apart from knowing the girl, I believe her because she couldn't have invented some of the things. She had never heard of Robert Underhay before, for instance. So I believe her story of what passed between the two men and not David Hunter's. I too, said Perriott. She strikes me as a singularly truthful witness. We have confirmation that her story is true. What do you suppose the brother and sister went off to London for? That's one of the things that has interested me most. Well, the money's positions like this. Hmm. Rosalind Cloud has only a life interest in Gordon Cloud's estate. She can't touch the principal, except, I believe, for about £1,000, but jewellery, etc., is hers. The first thing she did on going to town was to take some of the most valuable pieces round to Bond Street and sell them. She wanted a large sum of cash quickly. In other words, she had to pay a blackmailer. You call this evidence against David Hunter? Don't you? Perriott shook his head. Evidence that there was blackmail. Yes, evidence of intent to commit murder. No, you cannot have it both ways, mon cher. Either that young man was going to pay up, or else he was planning to kill. You have produced evidence that he was planning to pay. Yes, yes, perhaps that is so, but he may have changed his mind. Perriott shrugged his shoulders. I know this type. I know his type, said the superintendent thoughtfully. It's a type that's done well during the war. Any amount of physical courage, audacity, and a reckless disregard of personal safety. The sort that will face many odds. It's the kind that is likely to win the VC, though, mind you, it's often a posthumous one. Yes, in wartime, a man like that is a hero. But in peace, well, in peace, such men usually end up in prison. They like excitement and they can't run straight and they don't give a damn for society. And finally, they have no regard for human life. Perriott nodded. I tell you, the superintendent repeated, I know the type. There are some few minutes of silence. Ah, bien, said Perriott at least. We again agree that we have here the type of a killer, but that is all. It takes us no further. Spence looked at him with curiosity. You are taking a great interest in this business, Mr. Perriott. Yes. Why, if I may ask? Frankly, Perriott spread out his hands. I do not quite know. Perhaps it is because when 2 years ago I am sitting I am sitting very sick in my stomach, for I did not like air raids, and I am not very brave enough. I endeavor to put up a good appearance when, as I say, I am sitting with a sick feeling here. Perriot clasped his stomach expressively. In the smoking room of a friend's club. There, droning away, is the club bore, the good Major Porter, recounting a long story to which nobody listens but me. I listen because I am wishful to distract myself from the bombs, and because the facts he is relating seem to me interesting and suggestive. And I think to myself that it is possible that someday something may come of the situation he recounts. And now something has come of it. The expected has happened, huh? On the contrary, Perrier corrected him. It is the expected that has happened, which in itself is sufficiently remarkable. You expected murder? Spence asked skeptically. No, 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 no. But a wife remarries. Possibility that finds husband is still alive. He is alive. He may turn up, do you think? He does turn up. There may be blackmail. There is blackmail. Possibility, therefore, that blackmailer may be silenced? Ma foi, he is silenced. Well, said Spence, eyeing Period rather doubtfully, I suppose these things run pretty close to type. It's a common sort of crime, blackmail resulting in murder. Not interesting, you would say. Usually, no. But this case is interesting because you see, said Period placidly, it is all wrong. All wrong? What do you mean by all wrong? None of it is, how shall I put it, the right shape? Spence stared. Chief Inspector Japp, he remarked, always said you have a torturous mind. Give me an instant of what you call wrong. Well, the dead man, for instance, he is all wrong. Spence shook his head. You do not feel that, do you? Perrier said. Oh, yes. Perhaps I am fanciful. Then take this point. Underhay arrives at the Stag. He writes to David Hunter. Hunter receives that letter the next morning at breakfast time. Yes, that's so. He admits receiving a letter from Arden then. That was the first intimidation, was it not, of the arrival of Underhay in Wormsley Vale. What is the first thing he does? Bundles his sister off to London. That's quite understandable, said Spence. He wants a clear hand to deal with things his own way. He may have been afraid the woman would have been weak. He is the leading spirit, remember? Mrs. Cloud is entirely under his thumb. Oh, yes, that shows itself plainly. So he sends her to London and calls on this Enoch Arden. We have a pretty clear amount of their conversation from Beatrice Lippincott, and the thing that sticks out a mile, as you say, is that David Hunter was not sure whether the man he was talking to was Robert Underhay or not. He suspected it, but he didn't know. But there's nothing odd. But there's nothing odd about that, Emperio. Rosaline Hunter married Underhay in Cape Town and went with him straight to Nigeria. Hunter and Underhay never met. Therefore, though, as you say, Hunter suspected that Underhay was Underhay, he couldn't know if for a fact because he had never met the man. Perry looked at Superintendent Spence thoughtfully. So there is nothing there that strikes you as peculiar? I know what you are driving at. Why didn't Underhay say straight out that he was Underhay? Well, I think that's understandable too. Respectable people who are doing something crooked, like a like to preserve appearances. They like to put things in such a way that it keeps them in the clear, if you know what I mean. No, I don't think that is so very remarkable. You have got to allow for human nature. Yes, said Perio, human's nature. That I think is perhaps the real reason as to why I am interested in this case. I was looking around the coroner's court, looking looking at all the people, looking particularly at the clouds, so many of them, all bound by a common interest, all so different in their characters, in their thoughts and feelings, all of them dependent for many years on the strong man, the power in the family, on Gordon Cloud. I do not mean perhaps directly dependent. They had all their independent means of existence, but they had come. They must have come, consciously or unconsciously, to lean on him. And what happens? I will ask you this, Superintendent. What happened to the ivy when the oak round which it clings is struck down? That's hardly a question in my line, said Spence. You think not. I think it is. Hey, character, mon cher, does not stand still. It can gather together. It can also deteriorate. What a person really is only apparent when the test comes. That is, the moment when you stand or fall on your own feet. I don't really know what you are getting at, Mr. Perriot. Spence looked bewildered. Anyway, the clouds are all right now, or will be, once the legal formalities are through. Oh, that, Perriot reminded him, might take some time. There is still Mrs. Gordon Cloud's evidence to shake. After all, a woman should know her own husband when she sees him. He put his head he put his head a little on one side and gazed inquiringly at the big superintendent. Isn't it worthwhile to a woman not to recognize her husband if the income of the people, if the income of a couple of £1,000,000 depends on it? Asked the superintendent cynically. Besides, if he wasn't Robert Underhay, why was he killed? That, murmured Period, is indeed a great question. All right, that that concludes the reading for tonight. Yes, when we come back tomorrow, we will continue the reading of this book, Taken at the Flood. I want to say good night to everybody who came into the chat. Angie's cooking, Desireen, Card, Joseph, AG, who else is there? Just about everybody is here. Some people haven't hit the like button yet. Please go ahead and do so. I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the live. I sincerely appreciate you all. I hope you all are enjoying the story as much as I am enjoying reading it for us. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Traversant, where your journey matters. Sister Arely, and the others, thank you all so much for coming in, for staying with me, and for listening to the reading. Thank you all so much, guys. I hope you all have yourselves a great night. Thank you, Sister Arlene.